Welcome to another episode of Challenging the Norm. Here's an hers look at life and business with your hosts, Paul Snell and myself, Lindsay Burden. The podcast for solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and business owners that want to experience success in their own way. Wrestling with the topics that matter and reality checking the latest trends in business. Paul works with business owners, showing them how they can take the stress out of transforming teams into performance powerhouses that love what they do, while I offer business coaching that empowers ambitious women in business to create financial abundance and a time-rich lifestyle without sacrificing their joy.
Here we are again. Welcome, Lindsay. Another great episode, but I know you have an idea for this one. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing a bit more.
I do have an idea. So you and I both use that fabulous app, Duolingo, to learn a language, because it's important to learn new things and to push ourselves. And they use a phrase, and I may get it slightly wrong, and I haven't looked it up, but basically they say when they're promoting their paid offering, make as many mistakes as you need. And it just really resonates with me, Paul. I just love this idea that we can go out in business and make as many mistakes as we need. And you and I know we have to learn, and to learn, we have to make mistakes.
We do. And I think also there's a comfort about that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, and in fact, I do know about you and me. We are both enjoy getting things right because that's what we all aim for. But there is a comfort to know that, you know what, we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And I think it's really important that we dig around with this idea of making mistakes, which is why we're doing this episode, because I want to reassure people. Firstly, there is a difference between mistakes and failure. And secondly, why it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I always used to say that there are no failures, only fabulous learning opportunities. And so I don't know if that is it. I mean, mistakes, when I think of mistakes, I almost think of a teacher. Oh, that's a mistake. And that red pen comes out and the big cross, and they're not giving you a kiss on the bottom of anything. They are saying you are wrong. So I'm not quite sure how big the difference is, except it's how you perceive it.
Yeah, you're right. And so how about I'll give you a perception or a perspective from me.
Go.
Because it's sort of, it was a few years ago that I wrestled with this, and I ended up here. And that is, a mistake is an action, right? You make a mistake. And more often than not, because it's an action, it's something you can either rectify or learn from.
Yeah.
Whereas failure tends to be a thing that happens, right? And this is, we could get into the detail of semantics around failure and mistakes, but in my simple head, if it's a mistake, it's an action that I can rectify or learn from. When it comes to failure, it has a bigger connotation, right? And it's both, by the way, we learn from both, but when it's a mistake, a bit like this, mistakes are like stepping stones for me. I can make the odd mistake, and I can then jump over that stepping stone, learn from that, and move on. Whereas failure has a bigger connotation, not an end point, no less learning involved. It's just how I perceive the two. You know, when I look at mistakes, I love it. I love it. And we're going to get a little bit scientific, not much, because that's not what we do, right?
I'll let you.
But we apparently, lots of research has shown that we have this mechanism in our brains that learns from mistakes and is able to spot them so that we adapt moving forward. Now, that sounds really easy, and it sounds like, oh, that's perfect, then we'll never make mistakes. No, that's not the case, because there's will involved. You know, you've got to want. But they reckon there's 0.1 of a second where your brain recognizes a mistake you made in the past if it's going to be repeated. That doesn't say that it's going to be any easier to stop making that mistake, but it is a recognition that learning from mistakes and developing is very much around a growth mindset. So if you ever read Carol Dweck's stuff, you'll understand the difference between growth and fixed mindset. growth mindset is definitely in the realm of mistakes.
Yeah.
But there's one factor in there that I've always found interesting, and that is research showed that people that learn most from mistakes are curious about the mistake. Whereas normally, I don't know about you, but I'm certainly a geek to this. I go, if I make a mistake, just put that under the carpet, sweep it under the carpet. We won't make that again. Let's move on. But apparently the research says if we stay curious about the mistake we made and the resolution to it, that reinforces, that kicks off all those synapses in our brain that reinforces the lesson we learned from the mistake. So I find this fascinating, this whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that definition between the mistake and the failure. And I don't want to, so for me, talking about mistakes, it's an action. You can learn from it, you can correct it. And that absolutely applies to Duolingo. Other apps are available and we're not sponsored by them because I'm sure we've mentioned them several times before. But the point they're making is you just keep learning, you just keep learning, and you just keep trying. And the more that you do it, the better you will become, the more you will remember. So I get that. But I think we need to explore the failure piece just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because it feels to me as if when we say the word failure, it immediately makes me want to go, oh, and it feels like the brick wall comes up and there is nothing I can do.
Mm.
There is nothing I can do to change that. And yet I see failure and mistakes in a similar kind of way, because if a young child got on a bike and fell off while they were learning and went, well, that's a failure, and never did it again. And I know that's an action, but you've still got that, well, I'm a failure. And we hear that a lot from young children, and I'm sure we hear it from business owners as well.
But you've just hit it on the head, though, haven't you? You've just hit it on the head with those words. Failure is about identity.
Yeah.
Whereas mistake is about an action. So I agree with you. In fact, that's a brilliant example, because it's the fine line difference between failure and mistake is I fell off my bike. That was a mistake. What do I need to do to learn? I'm paraphrasing. Yeah. Whereas if I fell off my mistake, that's it. I'll never be able to ride a bike again. That's all to do with identity.
And I do wonder if the challenge, particularly for business owners, but also this applies to things in life, is that we try to do something and it doesn't work out as we planned, doesn't work out as we'd hoped, doesn't work out like Jim down the road, because he seems to be doing it awesomely. And that's where we get into that place of imposter syndrome, of not being good enough, not being worthy, and all of those things come up. So when I suggested doing this podcast today, it was such a simple concept rather. It's failure or mistake. We can have as many as we like, and we should have more of them, and we should have more fun with them. But actually, the more we talk about it, it's getting more complex for me, in that there are so many different factors to it.
Yeah. And we need to be a bit careful with that because we can overcomplicate it. And it is, for me, it is a fine line, actually, between failure and mistake. For me, from my perspective, I find it more palatable to acknowledge a mistake than to acknowledge failure.
Yeah.
Because failure feels so final.
Yeah, it does.
Whereas if I make a mistake, now, I'm going to caveat that and go, that I don't think that's permission to continually make the same mistake. Right? No. We can make as many mistakes as Duolingo would say. You can make as many mistakes as you like. I agree. I do agree. But the caveat that and go, the objective of being curious about a mistake and learning from a mistake is that you try and mitigate that for the future. No guarantee, but to me, the mechanism, I guess, around mistakes it leans towards this idea of a sort of correction in your journey rather than a full stop.